What's up, everybody? Core Used Bloody History. We're back. Today we're going to wrap up this HSCA interview of Alan B. White, who was the number 2 man in Mexico City at the time of the alleged visit by Oswald. But we all know that Oswald never went to Mexico City and that Kerry Thornley did. We're going to pick up right from where we left off. Page 39. Mr. Goldsmith then says, it asks for further information to be sent to headquarters reporting any contact for positive identification. Do you know if the Mexico City station ever sent any additional information to headquarters on Oswald? For example, did they ever indicate to headquarters that Oswald had been to the Cuban embassy as well as to the Soviet embassy and that he wanted a visa? Okay, so that just kind of got in my head, a little prompted me to remind everybody the backstory here and why any of this is fucking significant, right? So the reality is that we know for fact it was Kerry Thornley who went to Mexico City. We know it was Kerry Thornley because of the coinciding of the timing of the statements of Elena Guerrero de Paz, who says that she saw him at a party and that he knew Sylvia Duran and all that stuff, which happened at the very beginning of September or the end of August, which completely coincides with Kerry Thornley's trip from Whittier, California, right back to New Orleans, right? And so, therefore, we know, number one, it wasn't Oswald and that it was Kerry Thornley. The reason that this is a big fucking deal, and the reason that we know that the CIA station in Mexico City was in on this and complacent with this, is because they were surveilling this fucking place. They claimed that they weren't surveilling on weekends. But do you believe that? Do you believe the CIA decided, they're not busy on the weekends, we're going to take the weekend off? Does that make sense to you? If you were CIA, would you take the weekends off? The fuck kind of bullshit is this they spit to us? I mean, it's unfucking believable. No, the CIA didn't take the fucking weekends off, okay? They had 7 days a week, 24-hour-a-day monitoring of the fucking embassies because that's their fucking job, right? Oh my God, these fucking cunts. And good pastor, fuck you, man. Seriously. So Kerry Thornley went to one or both of these embassies numerous times over a period of a couple days, right? Between September the 28th and October the 1st. Although I will dispute, I should dispute the October the 1st date, seeing as how the visa and the bus ticket had September 30th stamped on it, and we don't have any information indicating the bus left on the 1st, right? Or after that. So, this is what really gets me, is that the CIA, who had this place completely under fucking surveillance, they knew Kerry Thornley was going to the embassies. And they did nothing. They did nothing. The only photograph that they had that they sent to Washington was of Saul Sage, right? That big guy who looks like a fucking Russian. Okay? If you look at that guy's jawline, that's a Russian jawline and it's Russian cheekbones. Okay? He's got the code name of Saul Sage, if anyone wants to look that up. But, so the point I'm trying to make here is that the Mexico City station was completely and totally in on the setup of Oswald. Not maybe intentionally on the setup of Oswald, but at least in knowing that Kerry Thornley was going there. They took pictures of him. They had the recordings that the Tarasovs, right? The couple who were married who did the Russian translations for the CIA, the Tarasovs, they recorded allegedly Oswald. Remember, the person spoke in broken Russian. Right? Oswald spoke fluent Russian because he was a fucking from an Eastern Bloc country, right? So, we'll continue on. So Mr. White then says, I would have to assume that they did. I realize that assume is a bad word. You notice how all these guys in the CIA, they talk in very vague statements. It could have been. I assume so. Maybe. You don't have personal knowledge one way or another? No, prior to the assassination, I would not. CIA number 181 is headquarters copy of the 110 cab from headquarters to Mexico City, which was just reviewed. I note in the bottom left-hand corner that some Thomas Karamessines, Karamessines, was releasing officer. Why would someone that high in the organization be the releasing officer on a cable like this? Can I read the first page? Certainly. The reason would have been, I don't know what the ground rules at the DDO level were at that time, but the reason would have been, in all likelihood, that any cable concerning the attention to coverage of an American overseas would require the knowledge and approval of the DDP. What would the reason for that be? The question of CIA involvement on the coverage of Americans. This was a very goosey matter even then. As you can see, it involved coordination with the FBI and state and immigration and so forth. That was my next question. Why would this information have been passed along to these many agencies? In other words, why was the dissemination so wide? You would have to ask Tom Karamessines. I can't answer that question. That depends on agreements that were valid at the time between agencies. I would have no knowledge of that. After the Mexico City station received the cable from headquarters, which gave the background on Oswald and indicated that Oswald had been a defector to the Soviet Union, to your knowledge, did that in any way enhance the importance of Oswald's contacts with the Soviet embassy? Oh, yes, sure it did. The fact that he had that kind of background, sure, he became someone of considerable operational interest. Again, there was nothing other than operational interest. In all likelihood, that cable would have been prompted by the people at the station to go back and look at the earlier transcripts. And Mr. White says, yes, I would think so. Goldsmith then says, and also to look for the photograph. I would think so. Do you know whether prior to the assassination there was any additional action by the Mexico City station in reference to the Oswald case? Other than analytical action and probably reviewing files to determine whether there was anything else that they might dig out on him or tie him to as a result of these phone calls, I'm not aware. I really couldn't say. If Oswald had been an agent of the KGB, would headquarters have notified you of that? If they had known it, they certainly would have. You don't normally expect an agent of the KGB to be turning up in broad daylight at the main gate of the embassy or telephoning around town. If Oswald had been an agent of the CIA, hypothetically now, would the cable from headquarters have indicated that to you? Well, we would like to hope it would have, but it needn't necessarily have. Now that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think he's kind of accurate on that statement. So let me reread this. It says, if Oswald had been an agent of the CIA, hypothetically now, would the cable from headquarters have indicated that to you? And then Mr. White says, well, we would like to hope it would have said that, right? So he's like, well, we really would like to know if, but headquarters doesn't always tell us that shit, right? So what does that say? That's extremely important because it does indicate here that there is a possibility that the Kerry Thornley thing might have been, not notified directly by headquarters, right? You have to think. We think of these things in real time, right? Like the CIA would have known everything as it was happening, and I don't think that's the case, right? A lot of this is hindsight. They had to go back and scrub records. They went back and they scrubbed recordings and they scrubbed photographs, right? Because we don't have any idea of what fucking pictures were taken because they just lie, and they've had 60 years to cover it up. So, when it comes to Kerry Thornley posing as Oswald in Mexico City, and did the CIA in Mexico City know about it? Well, some CIA knew about it, certainly. He most certainly had to have let Clay Shaw know, David Ferry know, Martin McAuliffe know, all these guys, right? So they would have known, and they would have been... See, there's a connection between David Atlee Phillips and New Orleans. David Atlee Phillips was involved in the coordination of some of the Cuban stuff in New Orleans, right? And he happened to be stationed in Mexico City at the time for 4 fucking years, right? So I think it's pretty goddamn logical that David Atlee Phillips was in the know on what was going on. Had to have been. He allegedly wrote a book and shit, but I can only find like excerpts of it and commentary on it. I can't find the actual book. Ryan Dawson tells me that it's kind of like OJ's If I Did It kind of thing. But I can only find like a short summary of it. I can't find any details or the actual manuscript itself, but Ryan says it's out there. So if anybody out there can find the manuscript, the full manuscript by David Atlee Phillips of his book, the one that's like, If I Did It kind of thing, I very much need a copy of that. I also need the Hank fucking Greenspun letter. If anybody out there happens to have the Hank Greenspun letter, please fucking let me know. All right, let me continue on. They might have let the Mexico City station just proceed to evaluate and analyze the Oswald case without giving them that information. And then Mr. White says, that's always possible in the intelligence world. The principle need to know applies pretty widely, Mr. Goldsmith says, after the assassination, what was the scene in Mexico City? By that I mean, what was the atmosphere? Crisis. The effort to run down clues on the Oswald thing took priority over anything else. How many people were sending back cables back and forth between the station and headquarters? Well, the Cuban section was originating cables concerning Cuban involvement. The Soviet section was sending cables concerning the Soviet involvement. When Scott was sending back think pieces. What is a think piece? His own analysis of what probably happened. Did you ever see any of those pieces? I probably did. I say this was happening. It was typical of the kind of thing that happens. All I am saying is that anybody who had a piece of the pie was originating traffic on it. They all funneled through Wynn. The traffic did not go out simultaneously. Each section would have originated the cable, and eventually it would have gone to Scott's, who would have sent the cable to Washington. That's right. Neither can assume that the cables went out in the same sequence that the events with which they dealt with occurred. I understand. To your knowledge, was Mr. Scott upset at the failure of the Mexico City station to obtain a photograph of Oswald during his visit to Mexico City? Wynn was a very phlegmatic fellow. He occasionally blew his top, but normally you didn't know when he was upset by something. Sure, I think we were all concerned that we didn't have any specific identifiable photograph of Oswald. I can't recall the specific reaction at the time, but I'm pretty sure that it would have had to do with our inability to keep the camera going 24 hours a day. 7 days a week. Do you recall if the coverage was modified after the assassination? I don't recall that it was, but it probably was, for a while anyway. In fact, it could have been even before, I don't know, as a result of this Washington cable that showed Washington was concerned. It seemed to me that the photographic circumstances were rather bad. There was one guy and his wife who manned the camera. They were in a little confined space. I can't remember whether they had kids or not, a child, but there is a question. It was partially a question of pressure on them, too. We could establish, and Mr. Goldsmith, we could establish by reviewing the transcript that Oswald visited the embassies a total of at least 4 times, and possibly as many as 6 times. In fact, the IGR states he might have visited as many as 6 times. What is IGR? The Inspector General's report. Do you think that it is unusual that Oswald made 6 visits to the embassy, would still manage to avoid being photographed? In other words, the station went 0 for 6 on an Oswald. Correct, he did. That's exactly the fucking point. That's exactly the point. Now, let me just say this. If Mexico City was not aware of Oswald's presence until notified later, and they had photographs of everything, they clearly would have had photographs of Kerry Thornley. So what do you fucking think the meeting was like? When they fucking get pictures from Washington of what Oswald looks like, they go back looking through the fucking pictures, they find the 4 to 6 visits that he makes to the embassies, and they pull the close-up photos, and they're smart enough to realize that it ain't the same guy. They then have to relay that information back to Washington, that it's not the same guy. Then what has to happen? Then you get motherfuckers from Washington getting on a plane and flying to Mexico City. Because they ain't going to fucking handle this over the fucking phone. Or through memos. A motherfucker needs to be put in his place. And someone from fucking Langley is going to hop on a plane and go to Mexico City and make sure everybody's on the same fucking page. That is what happened. I promise you that's what happened. Then there was an organizational analysis of who knew what, and they proceeded to isolate all of the fucking members of the Mexico City station and ensure that their information on Oswald or anything surrounding that event was completely fucking limited. Need to know only. We're going to get to the Tarasovs. Because the Tarasovs, they would be witnesses who would know if it was Oswald's voice or not. Remember what we spoke about yesterday? Mr. Tarasov was considered an expert at voice analysis. So we will get to their interviews. Now, what are we looking for in going through all this Mexico City stuff? It's kind of changed a little. Our goal has changed a little because now we kind of have a grip on what the fuck went on down there. Now we know what to look for. Now we know that someone from Washington had to go down there and set everybody straight. Or when Scott went to Washington and came back to Mexico City and set everyone straight. That would have had to have happened almost immediately after the assassination. So we probably should look for some travel to and from the Mexico City station on November 22nd or the 23rd. They wouldn't have waited till the 24th. They would have got someone on the plane the next day. So, yes, if anybody out there can find if there was any travel between Washington and Mexico City as far as the CIA goes, if any of these guys are reported to have made this trip, somebody fucking did. Because now what you have is I'm following a logical train of thought here, right? So now what you have is they have the photos of the guy at the station, right? It's not Oswald, clearly Kerry Thornley. They fucking are working in the field, basically, and they realize, holy shit, that's not Oswald. You know, they get a pucker factor instantly. They instantly know the CIA is up to something because these people work for the fucking CIA. Almost kind of lockdown measures had to have gone in place in Mexico City once they realized that the man in the photographs was not Oswald. And I'm not talking about the Salt Stage photo. That's a distraction. That was the photo they had to send. Because they had to send something, right? But yeah, like, there's no chance. Do you really think there's a possibility in the world they went 0 for 6 on photographs of Oswald? Or whoever went as Oswald? No, of course not. Of course not. And they don't take fucking weekends off. I don't care what they say. So when you acknowledge that, this logical chain of thought is what has to have happened. They immediately realized it wasn't Oswald and had to have known it was Kerry Thornley. There had to have been some major back and forth between the Mexican FBI and the CIA station because they arrested Sylvia Duran the day of the assassination. Right? And she was the one alleged to have had the affair with Oswald. And they had to have known that because they arrested her. And they probably also arrested her because they knew that she was one of the few people there who dealt with the man and that he was not Oswald. And she could not be fucking out there telling people it was not Oswald. They had to arrest her that day, whether she was fucking Oswald or not. The fucking Oswald story is probably a planted story to cover for why they arrested her, because they would have no other reason to arrest her, right? Yeah, we'll get to Sylvia Duran. God damn it. Sorry, guys. We're probably going to be on Mexico City for another week or two. Don't worry, my list of things to get to is adding up. It's getting longer every day. So, all right, let me continue. You say that the transcript indicates that he visited the embassy as many as 6 times. We can go over the transcript piece by piece, and you would see that if you make the appropriate inferences, he went to the embassy 5 times. For example, the conversation on September 27th between Oswald and the Cuban embassy, and at the Cuban embassy and the Soviet embassy, he says he is clearly at the Soviet embassy. He says, I was there. He clearly at the Cuban embassy and says, I was there at the Soviet embassy earlier. That is 2 days. The next day, the 28th, he is calling again from one embassy to another, and he says, I will be right over. I was there earlier, and I am coming back again. There's 3 times. And we have 5 times in 2 days. My recollection is that the Inspector General's report indicates he was there 6 times, although I don't know what basis he had for saying that. In any event, if he was there 5 or 6 times, let me back up again. Holy shit. So now we have headquarters is now saying that it was 6 times, right? But they only have evidence of 5 times. So obviously the CIA knows something. How is it they would have known something? Because they got the photographs. It's the only logical explanation. And that everything that Ann Goodpasture and Alan White and all these fucking people are saying is just covering up for that fact. My recollection is that the Inspector General's report indicates he was there 6 times, although I don't know what the basis they had for saying that. In any event, if he was there 5 or 6 times, my question is not directed toward criticism of the agency. I'm wondering, in light of the fact that he was there, if he was there 5 or 6 times, it is likely a photograph of him was taken. Mr. White then says, I think the answer to your first question is yes, it would seem to be the most unlikely that he could go there 5 or 6 times and escape being photographed if he did it during normal hours. Is there anything in the transcript that would indicate that all these visits were during normal hours? 3 of the visits would have been on a Saturday. One of the other visits would have been late in the afternoon, Friday afternoon, about 4 o'clock. The other one on Friday, earlier on Friday. You can't tell by looking at the transcript what time he had been there. Then we possibly could eliminate 4 of those visits, 3 on Saturday and 1 at 4 o'clock if the consulate was closed. I no longer remember what hours the consulate kept. So remember, they're sticking to the story that they only fucking spied on the consulate during business hours. You people understand the CIA. Do you fucking think for a second they were only spying on the consulate during business hours? Hello? Unfucking believable. So that would have left only once or maybe twice when we should have gotten him and didn't. I just don't know. Mr. Goldsmith says, let's take a look at CIA number 197. The reason for showing you this at the time is that report of Oswald's contact of 28 September 1963. Is that correct? Yes. And this is November 23rd. This has been previously sent, had it not? And Mr. Goldsmith says, no, this was the first time that was being sent. Really? To headquarters. And Mr. White says, what was the date of that last cable from headquarters that said send everything? That was dated October 10th or 11th. Mr. White says it wasn't until the 23rd that this thing came. That's right. Mr. White says, wow, I'm sorry. Your question was, my question was only that this cable reports the contact of September the 28th, 1963. Is that correct? Yes, this is the one you asked me about before with respect to paragraph 2. That is right. In paragraph 2, it makes reference to Oswald's October 1st contact. Is that correct? Yes. Let's just turn to CIA number 202, which is a cable. Would you read paragraph 6 of that cable? Do you mind if I read the rest in order to get it in context? Sure. Mr. Goldsmith says paragraph 6 indicates, other than information already sent re Oswald's connection with the Soviet and Cuban embassies, no other information available. My question is, it seems that only information sent so far was on the September 28th contact and the October 1st contact, and there were 2 contacts on September 27th. Do you know why headquarters wasn't told about those other contacts at the time? No, I don't. Somebody must have simply overlooked them. I tell you, the volume of paper that was being handled by a small number of people just boggles the mind. Wynne was a very fast reader, and a couple other people were, but the processing of all this detailed paper was a terrible time-consuming affair. I can only explain it that it must have gotten lost in the furor of processing what was deemed to be higher priority stuff. I was going to say, did it not emerge later that during this combing of all this available material that they overlooked those 2 days? Goldsmith says later on, at headquarters was apprised of the September 27th contact. Who sent out this cable? Herb Manel, and it was released by Wynne Scott. Who's the authenticating officer? That is Manel. Let's pull everything on Herb Manel and see if we can find some HSCA testimony. Mr. Goldsmith says, what is above Manel? It says, those are the initials GHG. It is GH Gestetner, the same here as GHG. But that Rybat is a sensitive indicator. It was not at all unusual in cases that were regarded as sensitive that the originating officer would send them just to the station chief for release. Please look at CIA number 225. Okay. Did you write that cable? I had to, I'm sure. My question is, that cable indicates Oswald's only known contact was the 928 contact with the Cuban embassy. Yes. At the time that you sent that cable, were you aware that Oswald had also visited the Soviet embassy? I was not. I clearly was not. I don't even know why I wrote that, how I got into the business of writing the cable. What day was the 23rd of November? It was a Saturday. Well, that may be why. What do you mean? There was an outstanding requirement on photos left over from the day before, and somebody wasn't in from the Soviet section to bounce it off of. Are you saying that on that day you would have checked with anyone that was available and perhaps the Soviet people were not around? That is what I'm saying. Wouldn't you think on the 23rd of November, the date after the president had been killed, everyone in the station would have been around? Yes, it really doesn't make sense. As I recall, it was about noon Mexico time, was it not? When what? When he was killed. What time of day was it? I was in the car. I remember I was in the car. He was killed approximately 12:30 Central Standard Time. I don't know how that relates to Mexican time. I think we're an hour off. This cable was sent the day after the assassination, the 23rd of November. Yes. In other words, why didn't I know what the station knew before this is what you're asking. Right. I can't explain it. I can't explain it except either I had not seen all the traffic. I assume I should have before I wrote this. After the assassination, you see what he's doing here? He's backpedaling on his own work, right? Remember, we can always rest assured that the work that was submitted from Mexico City to the CIA on the day of or the day after the assassination is accurate. And they had to go back and they had to change things. And that every single one of these fucking people, and Goodpasture and Alan White, they're backtracking and saying, yeah, I guess I don't know why I did that. I guess I was stupid, right? No, you aren't fucking stupid. You're lying. There's a big difference. I can't explain it. I can't explain it except either I had not seen all the traffic. I assume I should have before I wrote this. Goldsmith says after the assassination, the Mexico City station conducted an investigation into Oswald's activities while he was in Mexico. Yes, we had a continuously ongoing search of files and all possible sources that we thought would contribute. Who was connected with the investigation in Mexico City, the FBI or the CIA? I had no knowledge of what the FBI was doing, only what the station was doing. Did the station contact its sources? Did it contact sources of assets to find out what Oswald's visits with the embassy may have been about? We certainly contacted any sources that we thought would have had anything to contribute. The funny thing about the cable is that there are no signatures on it. I don't understand why it does not have any signatures on it. Does the cable normally have signatures on it? Sure, I see. This was the headquarters copy. There's nothing unusual about it itself. No. When did you first realize that Oswald had been to both embassies? Do you recall? No, I do not. It must have been soon after this, though. Did the CIA investigate Sylvia Duran after the assassination? What do you mean by investigate Sylvia Duran? Did you talk to any of her associates? Did you interview her? I can't remember who was in charge of the Cuban section at the time. Dave Phillips. It would have been someone in his shop who would have done it if it had been done. I believe she was interviewed. Goldsmith says, at one point, the CIA headquarters cabled the station and indicated that headquarters did not want to have Duran arrested by the Mexicans. Do you know why that instruction would have been sent to the station? No, offhand, I couldn't say. Do you have any reason to believe that Oswald may have been a KGB agent? I have no reason to believe. You can always speculate. I don't believe so. If he was a very poor one the way he handled himself. Do you have reason to believe he worked in some capacity for the CIA? I have no reason to believe that. Do you know what the term CISIG stands for? Special Intelligence of the Counterintelligence Staff. What was the work of the CISIG unit? I don't know. They had a couple of special units. One of them dealt with very sensitive operations. The CI staff was strictly a paper-pushing outfit. They had one or two branches or groups. SIG was one which did engage in actual physical contact operations, agent operations. Would it have been unusual for CISIG to have been the group that opened up Oswald's 201 file? Initially? Yes. I can't answer that. I don't know what was usual or unusual for them. The CI staff was a highly unusual outfit. Would it have been standard CIA procedure for an agency employee to have interviewed or debriefed Oswald upon his return from the Soviet Union to the United States? It depends on what was known about him at the time. If he were a security suspect, it would have been unusual. The Bureau would have done it at our behest. The Bureau would have done it routinely anyway, but if he were a routine visitor to the Soviet Union, we might have done it through our overt division. That's the distinction you would draw, said Mr. Goldsmith. If Oswald had been a security suspect of some kind, it would have been a Bureau's job. If he were a visitor or a businessman, then the CIA may have done it. Yes, but through one of its overt domestic contacts. What is a 201 file? A 201 file is a biographic file that contains information about one person. Would a 201 file indicate whether or not a person was an agent, asset, or source of the CIA? Yes, most likely, but there were other kinds of 201 files. The 201 file would not necessarily deal only with people who were agents. What other kinds would there be? Anyone on whom, let's say, we had a liaison with a German police formation, we would have a 201 files on the principal officers with whom we dealt. All the information about that individual would go into that 201 file. Are you saying that the mere fact that a 201 file exists does not necessarily mean that the person for whom the file has been taken out was an asset, agent, or source of the agency? Yes, that's what I'm saying. Would a 201 file be opened if someone were perceived as a counterintelligence threat? It could be. If in fact someone were an agent for the CIA, would that automatically be noted in a 201 file? Not necessarily. Actually, it would be in the 201 in case of an agent would be sort of bare biographical data. All operations data would be in the operations file. So a 201 is biographical and it's an operations file that has all the good stuff. Is it possible that the 201 file would indicate the agency relationship, but it is also possible that it would not? Yes, it would be a kind of hard if a man were an agent for there not to be some hint in there that he was. It might not have specifics. A 201 file was really a file designed to enable agency name check procedures to be conducted and be accurate, but not necessarily reveal to unauthorized members of the agency that there was an operational relationship with that person. Am I making a distinction clear? Yes, I understand. If you wanted to find out what operations that a particular agent had been involved in, how would you go about getting that information? The agent has a cryptonym. The cryptonyms in a case file would be broken down into 4 parts. The first part of which is the biographical information. That would be the 201. The second part would be the administrative information. The third part would be operations, and the fourth part would be production. In part 3, there would be ordinarily a monthly progress report or at least a quarterly progress report on that operation that would be summarized in that. For each agent, there would be an operational file that you could turn to. That is right. You would not have to know the name of every operation that the agent was involved in advance to go to that particular operations file. You could just go to the operations file for that particular agent and it would list the information. It should list all the cryptonyms and all the operations he was involved in. Are you certain of that? I am certain that is the way it was meant to be. I am certain it was not always done that way. As a matter of routine procedure, is the way it is done, or was done. You left in 1976. I left operations in 70. What did you do between 70 and 76? I was in training, and I was the head of the anti-terrorist group. Do you know whether the agency ever considered recruiting Oswald? No, I certainly do not. Do you know whether Oswald had any contact with agency personnel while he was in the Soviet Union? I do not know that either. Were you ever interviewed by anyone from the Inspector General's office concerning the surveillance operations in Mexico City? When? During 63. Let me rephrase the question. Were you ever interviewed by anyone from the Inspector General's office concerning the surveillance operations in Mexico City during the time that Oswald was there? No, not to the best of my recollection. Have you ever been interviewed by the Inspector General's office in regard to any matter? Oh, yes. Sure, they used to make routine inspections of the stations and so forth, and I'm sure I have been. If they had asked you questions about Oswald in Mexico City, would you have remembered that? Gee, I don't know. That's kind of a funny question. If they had asked me questions, would I remember? Of course he'd fucking remember. He's a liar. The reason I ask you is that your answer to my question is, no, not to the best of my recollection. I guess I'm looking for a more definitive answer. I would like to be able to give it to you. If they did interview me, it must be a matter of record. I would rather say I can't remember than make a stab at it and give you a wrong answer because your work must be difficult enough without trying to let people get to back up on statements that they've already made. Well, it says here in the record, did you ever know a CIA officer named Maurice Bishop? Is that his real name? I don't know. I don't think I ever knew anyone under that name. Do you know whether David Phillips ever used an operational alias? I don't know if he ever did or not. Did you ever use any operational aliases? Yes. How many would you use? As few as possible because you can trip yourself up that way very easily. It would be very unusual for a case officer over a period of years, let us say, to have used hundreds of operational aliases. Hundreds? I would term it most unusual. For the reason you stated, it would be tough to remember which one you used with whom. Exactly. What is your opinions as to the manner in which the agency handled the Oswald case prior to the assassination? Prior to the assassination? Yes. From what I knew about it, I would say they handled it in a way that was to be expected, gave it the degree of importance that it merited. Did headquarters ever criticize the agency for not having a photograph of Oswald? The station? Yes, they may have. That really would have been the split milk department, wouldn't it? Or the spilt milk department. So it would not have made much sense to use the communications channel for that. I would have expected, if it were a criticism, if it did come as a criticism, to come more in a personal letter to Wynne or during one of his visits to Washington. Let me reread that because I'm intrigued by this. So he asked him about, was headquarters rough on you because you didn't have a photo of Oswald? And he's at, you mean like the station? And he goes, yes. And he goes, they may have. That really would have been the spilt milk department, wouldn't it? What's he talking about, the spilt milk department? I'm sure that the CIA has an internal affairs, their inspector general's office, right? Who, like, when shit goes wrong, they get to the bottom of it internally. What a fucked up job that must be. What a fucked up job that must be. All right, so we were going to blow up this building, right? And we fucking set the bombs and the building went off. Okay. So the inspector general has to go in and fucking interview CIA terrorists who blow shit up, right? That's fucked up. And then keep it under wraps. Would he have told you about that, referring to a letter to Wynne Scott if he'd have gotten one? He says he might have. He might not have. He was a strange guy. Do you recall one way or another whether headquarters ever did criticize the station? I don't remember any criticism for that. What's your opinion of the manner in which the station conducted itself after the assassination? Everybody was flat out, I tell you that, doing whatever he was doing to take care of as part of the affair. Whatever role had been assigned him to play, everybody was doing it without any regard to hours of work or anything else. That went on for a number of weeks. The recollection that I retain is one of continuously grinding out the same material over and over again, saying it in different ways. I can honestly say that I have never, since leaving the Mexico City station, reread any of those files until this material I have seen today. A lot of stuff has been superimposed on my memory of those events. The principal fact that concerned me was that, yes, we did get transcripts of Oswald's telephone calls, and no, we did not isolate a photograph of him. And that was a damn shame, but I personally can't fault anybody in the station for what he did or didn't do with respect to that investigation. Did you or anyone else at the station have knowledge of the CIA's anti-Castro assassination plots? No, I can only speak for myself. I don't know what knowledge other people had. It was not discussed with me. Mr. White, I would like to thank you very much for being here today. You've been very patient. You've been generous, blah, 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 blah. Do you have a statement? And Mr. White says, I don't have a statement I would like to make on the record, but let me say that I apologize for my faulty memory. I wish it weren't that way, but it has always been. It must be frustrating for you. Perhaps I'm not the first bad memory you've encountered. Of course not. Of course not. And he's basically telling him in no uncertain terms, we're not going to remember shit for you, buddy. Perhaps I'm not the first bad memory you've encountered. Thank you. Let me state the entire record of this deposition will be transcribed. You'll be given an opportunity to review it, blah, blah, blah. So do you want me down here again? Simply yes to read through the testimony. You can waive it if you want. You won't have an opportunity to amend it, but you'll have an opportunity to correct it. Blah, blah, blah. And that is it. End of deposition, 12:30 p.m. Deposition concluded. All right. And that is the only known statement of Alan B. White, who was the number 2 guy in Mexico City. I don't know why his name was consistently redacted throughout the testimony of Ann Goodpasture. No reason for that. So, what are we learning from Mexico City? We're learning that the Mexico City station and headquarters both know a whole lot more about what was going on than anybody's willing to talk. So, it becomes a cover-up operation. Once they realize the pictures are of Kerry Thornley, a cover-up operation had to jump into place. Period. No other explanation for any of the stuff that we don't see here, right? So we will get to Wynne Scott, and we'll get to the Tarasovs, and we're going to get to every single goddamn person who worked in that Mexico City station. And what are we going to see? Are we going to prove anything? Absolutely not. We're going to continue to see the same patterns. We're going to see faulty memories. We're going to see, oh, man, I guess I did some poor work back in the day. I don't know what that is, right? We're going to be a whole lot of, I don't know. Man, it shouldn't be like that, I get, right? A lot of vague answers from a bunch of CIA fucking spooks. But that's going to do it for today, guys. If you haven't subscribed to my Bloody History World War II, I would appreciate it if you did so. It's a really good show, talking about all things World War II. So that's going to do it for me today, guys. We'll be back tomorrow. See you then.